Hey, I'm Sam. In one of my favourite places. So, let's go somewhere a bit quieter. So, I've been asked several times to talk about detransition, and I've been reluctant to do that because I don't want to keep retelling the story of my life. Because I'm here now, and now is an endless moment of discovery. When we're traumatized, we're defined by the story that we keep telling ourselves over and over and over again, and I don't want to keep telling that story. But I have been asked so many times. I'm going to talk about it. I'm going to keep this video short, so it might be a little blunt in places, and there may be some harsh language, but I need to be as clear as I can about this. And so the less I say, the more clear it will be, I think. So if you are a trans-identified person, you know, and you think that idea describes what and who you are, then just remember, if you watch this video, I'm talking about me. I'm not talking about you, I'm talking about me. But I also do think it's clear that there is a cohort of people that transition and are escaping trauma. So, you know, that's true of me. So I'm just going to get straight in to what I want to talk about. So, I was abused as a little boy. And what that did to me, I'm still comprehending now as a man in my 50s. It's like somebody had reached into my mind, my psyche, with a razor blade and cut me to ribbons inside. And those psychological, mental and emotional wounds became the scars, the bars of my prison. So, you know, because I was born into severe neglect, very complicated situation, nobody noticed. Nobody noticed the distress I was in. For a long time, nobody noticed that I wasn't washing or cleaning myself. I had sores on my backside because I didn't want to touch myself. I was disgusted with my presence. That inner feeling of self-disgust became an outer expression of filth. And nobody noticed. Nobody asked why. And the abuse I went through in the family home was equally as bad. Well, we survive. We survive. And all my life I felt shame about what I did to survive. But I don't anymore. I've asked for forgiveness. And I have repented. Sincerely. And I know I am forgiven. But I see so clearly now that what I was doing as a little boy, longing to escape the wretched degradation of my life, was seeing clearly that my sister had it much, much easier. She still suffered. She did not have what was directed towards me, focused on my presence as a boy. She did not have that because she was a girl. In the school playground, I was the dirty, smelly kid that was bullied. And the girls' playground was separate to the boys' playground. The boys' playground was concrete. It was violent. The girls' playground was up some steps, and you couldn't see in. It was protected with shrubbery and hedgerows, but you could see that there was lawn and flowers and laughter. And because of what I went through as a kid, I now see very clearly that I was seeking wholeness. I clothed myself in my mother. I clothed myself in the appearance of femininity in the dressing up box at play school, because it was so different to the reality of my life as a little boy. And that became a habitual coping strategy. And, you know, after a lot of therapy and introspection, I see now that the boy that I was seeking wholeness with my own mother, who was also absent. We need tenderness. We need safety and protection and love. And I was just looking for that. You know, to clothe myself in my own mother, to become whole again with her. That's what I was doing as a little boy. And, you know, like I don't know whether this happens to everybody, but it happened to me. As a terrified little boy, I became feral. There were no boundaries, there was no protection. I was alone. And to protect myself, I became violent and aggressive. The more troubled I became, the more rejected I was. So it was logical for me as a boy, terrified of the isolation of masculinity, terrified of this thing that was controlling me, testosterone. I did not understand it. I could not cope with it. I didn't know how to direct it or harness it. I was like a tiny little boy on the back of a bucking bronco, completely out of control, and no guidance. So I sought a masculine role model. I sought to belong, and found a charismatic older man who was a villain, a gangster. He knew exactly what I was. I was a little boy looking for belonging. He drew me in and used me and betrayed me over and over again. And I experienced violence after violence after violence, betrayal after betrayal, terror. You know, I saw death. And so, you know, I got to a point in my early 20s and I'd experienced so much violence and fear, I couldn't cope any longer. And I became anorexic. I wanted to disappear. And the thinner I became, the more androgynous I became. I'd always been an androgynous boy anyway. I was very feminine in appearance, even when I was a young man. And quite, you know, when I was really in my teen years, when older men came on to me, it was scary, but I felt seen. So when I was in my 20s, I just wanted to disappear. And again, the idea of transformation into something I wasn't as a way of escape, like I did when I was a little boy in the dressing up box at play school, or in my mother's wardrobe, trying to become her presence, to find safety, wholeness. I did the same thing in my 20s, but I did it for real. I transitioned. I escaped myself as a boy. I escaped that feeling of disgust and self-hate, and I severed the shame I felt on the operating table. And it was surgical self-harm. That is clear. It was the annihilation of the shame. It was the annihilation of the disgusting boy. The boy whose presence was only worthy of contempt and abuse. It was also the annihilation of my father, where he lived in me. So, transition, quite honestly, was the greatest success of my life. It was successful in many ways. It was successful because I was right. My sister was more acceptable than me. And when I went to see my father after I transitioned, he hugged me for the first time. He drew me to him in tenderness, as he had never done before. And I was right. The moment was validating and heartbreaking at the same time. I was also right about something else. My mother had something that I registered as a little boy. She had a power, and it was a power over men that was sexual. Men desired her, and I saw that. And when I transitioned, I became that. I became a parody of my own mother. And I used the fact that I was desirable and the success of my transformation to gain validation, to feed that longing inside me to be seen. If you are not seen as a child, if you are not held in tenderness, if you are not seen, you don't even know you're real. If you're not touched, if someone does not look into your eyes and say, you are here, you don't even know you're real. And for me, the world I inhabited was terrifying and violent. So to be seen, to be validated, to be held, it was the most powerful aspect of transition. People were kind to me. For the first time in my life, people were kind to me. I was treated with tolerance. And I felt that this thing I'd done answered every question I had. But it didn't. I was a confused little boy pretending to be a woman. And one of the catastrophes of abuse is the distortion in our sexuality. And all my life, ever since I was a little boy, I had used sex, even as a little boy, because I thought sex was a way of finding intimacy. It was a mechanism for intimacy and belonging. And that's exactly what I did as a young trans woman. And because I did not know what tenderness really was, I thought sex was violation. I thought intimacy was violation. And I allowed myself, I invited violation over and over and over again. Because that's what I thought I was worthy of. The degradation I inflicted upon myself, the self-harm, was just something that only now, as a man in my 50s, I'm capable of comprehending and feeling. Because I feel strong now. And when I was a boy, the reason I sought out to clothe myself in womanness was because I was fucking terrified of the isolation of masculinity. I was terrified of the isolation of my own father and what he represented. I was terrified of the violence I experienced. I did not want to be alone. I wanted to be connected. I wanted to be whole. And I was right that transition gave me that. Because when I'd severed my masculinity and I no longer had testosterone in my body and I was taking synthetic female hormones, I did feel that oceanic connection to a realm of emotion that is not available to you as a man. And I hid there. I sought refuge there for my whole life. 27 years I have been taking estrogen. And I socialised very successfully as a woman. And I hid there. Maybe because now in my 50s, men come into their own in their 50s. They inhabit not isolation, but solitude. There is a solitude to being a man. And until we mature emotionally,